All right, back again with another movie review. I just saw Crisis on Infinite Earths, Part 1, 2, and 3. I know it's been a while since I've done a DC animated movie. But yeah, I used to be really into them. I watched every single one of them, and I've kind of fallen off watching them the last couple of years. I've seen Justice Society, World War II. I've seen Justice League Dark Apocalypse, which you definitely need to watch before watching Crisis on Infinite Earths. See Man Tomorrow. I think the big one I haven't watched yet is War World. I think that's a big one I haven't watched, which is definitely another big part of Crisis on Infinite Earths. And I gotta say, I really enjoyed watching Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's 3 parts. Each part is an hour and a half each. So that's 3, 4, 4.5 hours of movie. That's probably gotta be the longest animated film they've ever done. And does it all work? I don't know. They changed a lot of things from the original book to fit into the DC animated universe that they've done. And I really like that. I like how they use everything DC animated movies, television, and combine it all into this. And you actually see glimpses of all that, especially in the third part. You'll see, the Batman animated series stuff, and you'll see Super Friends. You'll see these worlds get destroyed, and it's just, I thought it was like great callbacks, great nods to what's come before. Super nerdy stuff. What I wasn't really expecting going in was just how emotional it was gonna be, and like the first part of this 3-part series alone it's gotta be one of the best DC animated movies they've ever done. Like just the first part alone. Flash's story in that, I don't know what it is with Flash, but he always gets the tears jerking from me, and I've straight up cried watching his and Iris's story, and how it all played out. And I really feel like that was the height of this Crisis on Infinite Earths. The other 2 parts of this, story are very good, very epic, but I don't think they reached the heights of the first part. And maybe it is too long. They can cut stuff out. You know what I'm saying? You could probably make this into a 3-hour film and that a 4.5-hour film. But yeah, I mean, what they were able to accomplish is pretty impressive. And I mean, I don't, people say these DC anime movies have like fallen off a cliff and they're not good anymore. I totally disagree with that. You know what I'm saying? Like, there was a couple years where they weren't putting out the best stuff. The Injustice anime movie was pretty rough. I think a lot of people kind of like gave up on the DC anime movies after that, But honestly, I feel like that's a fluke. Like, those types of misses don't happen that often in these DC anime movies. I'm thinking like Batman Hush. That was another miss. I did not like what they did with the ending. And usually, I'm not a big fan of them making changes, especially if you're adapting a book. Like, why don't you just adapt it word for word, like panel for panel, like they did with The Dark Knight Returns? And what do you know? I mean, that anime movie came out brilliantly. Like, I love it. It's one of my favorite, DC anime movies is The Dark Knight Returns. And on Crisis on Infinite Earths, like, they take a lot of the ideas that are in that story, like Supergirl dying, to sacrifice herself to save the, universities. And Anti-Monitor is the main villain, but they changed the design of Anti-Monitor to look a little different, you know what I'm saying? But I don't mind the changes, honestly. I like that they took the storyline from Crisis on Infinite Earths and adapted it to fit in their DC animated world that they've created. I think that's a good idea. And all the changes made sense. But I will stand by. The first part is probably the height. Like, I don't think I ever reached those emotional levels, ever again. Like, when you see Barry and Iris dies of old age and only seconds have gone by in the real time. Like, that's just like gut ripped out of you. But I will say, in order to really enjoy Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 1, 2, and 3, you have to be a big DC animated fan. You have to have watched almost every DC animated movie for like the last 20 years. That's those people, myself included, they're going to get the most out of this DC animated film. Like, we're talking references to like every DC animated movie. Like, it was a sight to behold. Something you're probably never going to get in the live action movies, because they won't have 20 years to build up to this, right? Like if you didn't watch Crisis on Two Earths, which had like Ultraman in it and the crime syndicate. They were the big bad guys in that movie. If you didn't watch that movie, you'll have no connection to like them. And when you go into Crisis on Infinite Earths, and it is is much more impactful, and just the daunting nature of like the threat they're up against in Crisis on Infinite Earths is so like helpless. It just gives you this helpless fucking feeling while you're watching it, and it makes you feel like the superheroes feel, like all their powers, and they can't do anything about this. There's a wave that's coming, and it's just erasing planets, and it's erasing people out of existence. And like, I assume they're not going to any afterlife. Like, it's really dark, and it's really sad, and it's not for kids. Like, this is not a kiddie film. Like I said, if you haven't watched DC animated movies for like the last 20 years, you're not going to understand half of what's going on in this movie. You're not going to be as impacted. And I just think the movie's too adult for kids. Like, not so much that there's like tons of gore and blood like there was in like Justice League Dark Apocalypse. Not so much that, but like just the themes and like what's happening. Like, super dark. I wouldn't want to show a kid this. let's be honest. But yeah, definitely geared towards adults. And I love it. You know, they know their fan base. They know who's buying these animated movies. They know who's watching it on HBO Max. So it makes sense. But man, quite the journey. I love Supergirl's, what her role was in the third part of this. And, you know, and I didn't watch Legion of Superheroes. That's another one I didn't watch. But now, like, after seeing Crisis on Infinite Earths, and I feel like this was the goal of the film, is to get people to go back and watch some of the more recent ones. Like, yeah, Warworld and Justice Society World War II, and Legion of Superheroes with Supergirl, and what's the other one? Man of Tomorrow. Like, these are big ones to watch. You could probably make a list of like the most important DC animated films to watch before watching this one. And yeah, it would be the ones I just mentioned. And it would also be films like Crisis on Two Earths. I really feel like you really need to watch Crisis on Two Earths to just get the base concept of what's happening, the multiple Earths, but also to understand who the crime syndicate is at the beginning of part 1. Because when you're watching the first part of this Crisis on Infinite Earths, it's playing just like a regular DC animated film. You know, they have some small threats that's, I forget the name of the villain, but he's like adapting to their attacks, and he's getting better, and it's just a robot. And it's like, we've seen this before in other DC animated movies, you know? I think his name's Phantasm. Amazo? It's Amazo. Yeah, it is Amazo. And I think we've seen Amazo in other DC animated movies. Names are slipping my mind. I feel like Amazo was in like Under the Red Hood or something like that, you know? Like one of those movies. So you see a familiar foe, you know, Justice League's fighting against him, and then all of a sudden it's mainly like a Flash story, the first part, and you see Flash get sucked into a different timeline, a different Earth, and you're like, oh shit, it's happening just like that other film, Justice Society. It's happening just like that, or it's happening just like Flashpoint Paradox. You know, you're being reminded of these other films, and you're like, oh, he'll figure it out, and you know, it's like, can't be that bad what's happening. But then the story keeps progressing, and it keeps progressing, and it's getting darker and darker, and it's getting more like, I'll go back to the same word, helpless. It's getting more and more helpless feeling that's happening. And then you see the familiar crime syndicate, and you're like, oh, they're going to be like the big baddies here, you know? And then you see their solution to how to fight this wave that's destroying the planets, right? And their solution is just to punch it, just to run up and punch it, right? And then you see how it doesn't work at all. And then you're like, oh shit, like this is like, they're not going to fight this threat with brute force like they do with every DC anime movie. Like usually all these anime movies end with them beating the bad guy by punching it hard enough. Like, you know what I'm saying? That's mostly these DC anime movies. And then you're like, it sinks in. You're like, oh shit. Like they're all fucked. You know what I'm saying? And Flash better run a little faster to get out of it. I just love that turn the movie makes to where you see the crime syndicate, you know they're powerful, you know that, you know, they're going to put up a fight, and then they're just instantly gone. You know what I'm saying? They no threat. You know what I'm saying? They didn't even have a chance. And yeah, I mean the amount of deaths that are in this trilogy is almost excessive. I don't know. But the whole point of Crisis on Infinite Earths was to get to like a reset point for the DC universe, to wipe away all this excess stuff and streamline and focus the storylines and stuff like that. And I feel like they definitely accomplished that by the end of this movie. Like, it is all set up for like a DC rebirth type movie, and I hope they go that general direction. You know what I'm saying? Let's get like a nice rebirth start, because some of the most successful points in DC Comics history is when they reset and reboot. Those are like the most successful points. That's when they sell the most books. That's when people are most interested. And usually the problem is sustaining that. And I feel like that's what they could do with these DC anime movies. But also, I feel like this is what they could do with the live action movies. You know what I'm saying? And it is very interesting how James Gunn wants to start with Superman Legacy and then a Supergirl movie that's already like well in development, and they're almost about to start shooting that, you know? So it makes me think, like, are they going to do a Crisis on Infinite Earths? You know, you set up Superman, you set up Supergirl, and then you get Crisis on Infinite Earths, Justice League, and, you know, live action movie. Like a 2-part live action movie. And it just resets everything because it's a nice clean break and everything from everything that's come before. And now we have our mainstay DC universe and stuff like that. I don't know. That kind of stuff was going through my head after watching it, you know, and seeing Superman holding Supergirl, you know, crying at the end. I'm like, wow, this would be a great start for a live action DC movie universe. I wonder if James Gunn is watching these and taking notes, because they really built it up quite nicely. Anyway, yeah, that's my thoughts on it. I'm not going to spoil every detail. You should go watch these films. It's very good. I mean, if you've watched DC anime movies your whole life, you're going to really appreciate it. If you're all caught up to date on the movies, then you've probably already seen them. But if you haven't yet and you're all caught up, watch it. I do recommend watching, like, everything before watching Crisis on Infinite Earths. I highly recommend it. You'll get so much more richer experience doing that. And I only seen like probably 90% of these DC anime movies, and there was still more I could have watched before watching this. And I just had a blast watching it. I loved it. And is it too long? Probably. That's my main complaint. It's like, this is a little too much. They could have probably cut it down to just 2 parts, you know, hour and a half each. Because they nailed the first part. I would give the first part like an A+. A+, 10 out of 10. The first part of this trilogy is fucking perfect. You know? And then the second part is kind of like meandering. They're just building and setting things up for the third part. And then the third part, you know, it has some emotional moments. I don't think it reaches the heights of that first part. And, you know, kind of ends. And it achieves the goal it's setting out to do, which is like reset everything. Give us a nice, like, clean break from what came before. I feel like that's what was the goal. Like, that's what they were going for. That's the goal. And I feel like they accomplished it. But, yeah, like, A+ for the first part. Probably, like, a B for the second part. And a B+ for the third part. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how I would feel about, you know, grading this trilogy right now. But yeah, comment below. Let me know what you thought of Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 1, 2, and 3. Do you agree with me? Do you think the first part was the best part? Do you think the third part was the best part? I don't know. Either way, I think it's a hell of an achievement that they made this. This is 4.5 hours of animated glory. It looked good. I feel like the animation I really got into. There was some CGI parts I thought they could have done without, because that stuff's going to not look good in like 10 years from now. So I don't know why they forced some CGI into this stuff. Some of the CGI looked great, but there was some like where you see night owls playing in CGI and it just looked real wonky. And I'm like, why did they even do that? But yeah, other than that, sounds good, looks good for the most part. Voice acting's all on point. I even hear Kevin Conroy in the third part at the end, and I choked up a little bit right there. Where like Joker's like, you know, the universe is ending, you're still chasing me, and Batman's like, if the universe is gonna end, then I'm gonna go out being Batman or something like that. Like, he says something like that. I'm gonna go out doing what I do, and that's being Batman. Like, and it was in Kevin Conroy's voice, so I got a little choked up as of that, because Batman the Animated Series was a huge part of my childhood growing up. I love that show. I remember when it, you know, rewatching all of it on Saturday morning. All the reruns of it. Batman Beyond. The new adventures of, you know, Batman and Robin. And Justice League Animated Series. Justice League Unlimited. If you grew up on that stuff and then you watched all the DC animated movies that came out, you're going to fucking love this movie. Like, this might be your favorite DC animated movie. But anyway. That's it for now. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye for now.
Something's about to happen. Something major.
I am Harbinger.
This is the thing.
Yeah, I figured.